Hi everybody, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. Today's extra, I'll warn you, I'm going to check out the fullerenes. The reason for that is it's a bit of a part of my theory on why the tech trees are so low at the moment. I just think that there's some stability in wormhole space at the moment that is just driving the prices of everything down, and it could actually be citadels that have a lot to do with that. Anyways, let's sit down, let's grab the market tab, and let's get going as always with plex at 40 seconds. Let's write that down and let's get started here. Plex, if you look at the charts, we are bottoming out here, just below the 900 million mark on the charts. When it comes to the numbers itself, sales are at 910 million, buyers are at 888.6 million. So plexes are trying to bottom out. I think there could be the current sale that is having a major effect here, because it's still, you purchase 90 days game time and you get 90 days multiple character training together with that. It's a really good deal, and that could mean just a little bit of lower demand for plexes, because people are actually straight up buying the game time and getting double the value basically out of that if skill points is what they value. So I think that's what's putting the pressure, but I also got an email that that deal is ending tonight. So if you still want in on it, go to the account management page and purchase it. But from tomorrow on, that deal will end, and so we may just start to go back up with plex. I think it's going to be pretty interesting. On the other hand, of course, it is the summer. Activity is probably declining in EVE Online as we speak. It's extremely good weather here in Belgium at the moment compared to what we've had in the last few weeks. So I actually just think that in general activity could start to decline, and that could put pressure on the prices of plex. My personal horizon, I'm still buying them whenever I can below 900 million. I think that's a great deal. And then I'm waiting for probably winter or something like that to actually look for a new high for plexes. It's an expectation. I can't see the future, but I want to give it to you guys anyways. Here we go, multiple pilot training certificate. You can see that one bumping of the 900 million mark. Currently sellers are at 968 million and buyers are at 877 million. So it's pretty obvious that the multiple pilot training certificates have already made a pretty big jump back up, which plexes hasn't done yet. At least that's how I think it's gonna work out. Next up, the pilot body resculpt. Not much to say here, just staying at around 240 million on very low volumes at the moment. Look at that, probably just one or two being traded every day here at the moment. That is definitely a lot less than what we had in the previous months. So not much to report on this one. Availability is still pretty decent. You have some of them at 250 million. The buyers are at 188 million. But if you know, that's a pretty healthy margin. You can think like, all right, I'm gonna actually be able to make some money on this if I manage to buy a few at 190. That could probably be filled and then try to sell at 245, something like that. Well, look at that, easy money. But considering the volumes, it's just not gonna happen to really make it worth it. Next up, what could be interesting here are the skill extractors. Oh, this is actually the 1 year chart. Let's go back to a 6-month chart to get a bit more detail on these. So we started at 310 million when they were first introduced, currently hovering at above 210 million and seemingly stabilizing here as well. That is pretty much a mirror of what's happening with plex right here. So I think that basically the very tight bond between plexes and skill extractors is starting to be on display now that the chart is having 5 months of data. We're having a much better idea of this. You can see here also a bottom at 200 million. We tried this twice. If you look at plex, here you go once and twice at 850 million. So the strong correlation here is definitely starting to show in the chart. Let's see what the skill injectors are doing. These are actually going up towards 620 million, and the biggest difference here is probably the skill points itself, because we were going down here to a bottom of 580 million. That would have been a really great time to purchase. Plexes were probably hitting the bottom of like 850 million here at the same time. But what changed? It's something that of course we could not expect to have happened is that CCP discontinued the daily opportunities, which meant that there's a big flow of skill points that was formed every day that is just basically going to that has ended when CCP decided to discontinue these at the start of Shadow of the Serpent. And as a result, of course, the value of skill injectors actually went up to 620 million. Here at the tail end, a bit more stability, right? Just trying to hover just above 620 million, which again is also the very tail end of the skill injectors. So I think that it's going to be extremely strongly correlated once CCP stops messing with the amount of sinks, faucets for skill points. Then we will, I think, see a very strong correlation between plex extractors and injectors, and the difference between injectors and extractors will of course be the current value estimated by the market of skill points itself. So that's it for the plex related stuff. I honestly think that we're in for a bit more stability. There will be forces driving the price up a little bit. I think natural inflation, and if CCP doesn't do a lot of sales during the summer, that could be drivers for an upwards trend, but lower activity I think is going to counter that very heavily. And so my expectation is that throughout the summer we'll maybe go up a little bit, because we did have a lot of sales that just finished basically, but I don't think we'll see straight upwards volatility or anything like that. I think we'll see a lot of hesitation, but once the summer ends, people start to come back to the game, be more active in the game. I think we could actually be in for an uptick in all of these, but of course only the future will tell. Next up, minerals, 650. Let's take a look at these. Titanium, unfortunately that's not looking too good, although you can see that we have a bit of a recovery at the tail end here, probably due to the much higher volumes about a week ago that are basically trying to support the price, but it's not working out. If we look at the actual numbers here, the sellers are at 595 and the buyers are at 572. Latest sell order coming in at 1.6 billion units of titanium. So what's pretty obvious is that we've left 6 ISK behind us. The sellers now have to compete below that, and that is basically something that could end up being quite costly for titanium. Here this uptick is towards 590, but of course this major seller of 1.6 billion units could be the trigger to actually stop this and start to go back down again. On the buyer side, there are still pretty decent orders, 1.0 billion, 1.6 billion, 1.8 billion. But honestly, I do think that we are in a little bit of an oversupplied situation. It's going to be interesting what the bottom will be. We can see on the chart here we reached as low as 5.6. So at some point there was so much supply that basically the average prices of titanium during those days, despite pretty high volumes, went as low as 5.6. So I think that the pressure is on for the high-sec minerals. Be pretty careful here. This also means, of course, that your high-sec mining is constantly decreasing in efficiency at the moment. Let's see if pyrite shows anything similar. Actually taking off, but 9.2 was obviously a clear 6-month low. So let's take a quick look here. 9.6 on the chart in the last few days. And market data 9.69 ISK for the sellers, 9.24 for the buyers. What is worrying though is the volumes here: 300 million units, 800 million units, another 100 million units. On the buyer side you've got 190 and 450 million units. So I would again give the edge to supply. I think it's natural, of course, at this point, because we got this uptick, but the fact that we are already back to 9.7 ISK, which is around here on the chart, yeah, on the sellers, I think is going to start to put the pressure back on pyrite. 9.20 already very low. In fact, some median averages at 9 ISK here about a week ago, I would say. So this is definitely still under pressure. I mean, it could be that 9.20 will turn out to be the bottom, but I don't see a pull up back to like 10 ISK or above 10 ISK anytime soon, considering that it is still supply that is showing higher volumes than demand in the pyrite market at the moment. Next up, we've got Mexalon. Let's see if that one is finally coming under pressure. No. So this is the one good news when it comes to high-sec mining. It is that Mexalon is still maintaining a high price. In fact, reaching a high price of 74 ISK on the chart here. Above that on medium prices. Should be pretty good. Yep, 76 ISK for the sellers, almost 72.5 for the buyers. You do have 100 million coming in, 50 million coming in, 13 million coming in here. You still have 55 million on the buyer side though, so a slight edge or a decent edge to sellers again. But to my great surprise, Mexalon has managed to maintain a price above 72 ISK, like around 74 average almost, in more than a month here, with all the other minerals showing pressure. This is quite surprising. So at the moment, if you're looking for efficiency in what to mine, in what to sell, then Mexalon is, I think, your go-to mineral or your go-to ore. Is stuff like plagioclase that actually produces a decent amount of Mexalon. And my advice, I mean, a few people asked stuff like this in the comments, so I'll quickly give it to you guys as well, is that if you have large stocks of this, I would not hesitate to sell off your Mexalon and maybe to wait for the other ones if you can afford to do that. But waiting, that does mean months. That means, just like with the plex market, have a large horizon for pretty much the rest of the year for a comeback of minerals. But Mexalon, I would not hesitate to sell it at this point, because considering all the pressure that we're seeing here in titanium, that's pretty obvious. Here in pyrite, 6-month low, also pretty obvious. And then here for isogen, we'll touch on that as well. 6-month low here as well. Mexalon, the one winner when it comes to the high-tech minerals, that is still at a very high price. So if you can sell, I would advise you to do so at the moment. Moving on to isogen here, double dip to a 6-month lows of around 88 ISK. Try to come back from that, but you can already see that the pressure is back on here. 20-day moving average still trending down from 98 ISK, so we didn't even really bump above 100 ISK for any significant amount of time. Yeah, this again, isogen starting at 810. You can see where we come from currently at the 6-month low point. Let's take a look at sellers and buyers. 89.59 for the sellers, 87 ISK for the buyers, so around 88, 89 on average. And despite that, we still have 30 million units coming in here, 6 million units, that's a couple of days ago. But when it comes to the buyers, 34 million and 11 million here. But that's really pretty much it. So a slight edge to the buyers on this one when it comes to the volumes. But considering how low we are, that's actually not surprising. What's actually surprising is that it's only by like 10 million units or something like that. So I think isogen is still in for some more pressure, trying to find a bottom. Unfortunately, that bottom will probably be below 90 ISK. So it could be 88, but it could be way lower than that as well. Be very careful here. Once again, isogen, I think, is also still under pressure despite the fact that we are at 6-month lows. Next up here, we've got the Noxium charts. This may look a bit more stable, from 480 to 450 over 6 months. Doesn't seem to be that bad with an actual low of around 430 ISK, but historically 450 ISK for Noxium is extremely bad. So this market is basically oversupplied compared to what it was historically. It's trying to find a new price range, and even here we are actually heading for a pretty low price at the moment. So 458 pretty much ISK for the sellers, 446 ISK for the buyers, and volumes wise, unfortunately, still 5 million units coming in for the sellers, 4 million units coming in here. All of this in the last 24 hours. It's pretty much equal to demand, 6 million here, 3 million here. So unfortunately for Noxium, it looks like the sideways meandering between, like, let's say 440 and 480 is still going to continue. You could stock up, but that, in my opinion, is a pretty big gamble. What would need to happen for Noxium to actually pull back to historic prices would be for CCP to step in and actually change something to maybe the ore compositions or something like that to increase the value of Noxium. And I personally don't think they're gonna do that, because Noxium is way more expensive than all the other high-sec minerals, but it is still something that can be mined in high-sec in some select regions, and then it's basically a transition between high-sec and null-sec, and for that I think the price is where CCP wants it. Next up, null-sec, let's touch on Zydrine here. Actually under pressure towards 1150, that's pretty interesting. 1177 for the sellers, 1112 for the buyers, so not that much margin anymore. Supply in the last 24 hours, not that much. You can see maybe 2 to 4 orders a day coming in. 1.1 million units is going to put a bit of pressure on the price still, but I think it could be that Zydrine is going to stabilize at this point, because we don't see that much really new supply coming in. People are probably willing to wait for the price to actually go back up a little bit. So Zydrine under pressure, but could be finding a bottom. And then Megasite was actually trending back up a little bit. Yes, 1350, actually taking off towards 1400. So the sellers are at 1423 ISK, the buyers are at 1360 ISK. Supply is a bit higher than in the Zydrine market. You actually have a few recent sell orders, but 400,000, 200,000, it's not that much. So it actually looks like supply is actually slowing down a little bit as well. Is it possible that some Nullsic activity that gets the axe first is Nullsic mineral mining? It is possible. It's also possible that a few groups are actually holding off, waiting for a better price to dump more of their stocks. But at the moment, I think that Nullsic minerals are stabilizing at their current price range. So around 1350 to 1400 for Megasite, and for Zydrine around 1150. Which is back to a more normal situation where Megasite is actually worth a little bit more than Zydrine. We've had this trade situation a couple of months ago where we're actually at the exact opposite. So here, for instance, mid-April, we had Zydrine at 1050 ISK, and then for the Megasite, we had Megasite at 1050 ISK, and towards that period, it actually they actually competed with each other for the highest price a little bit, which was quite weird. Next up, we've got Morphite that's continuing to be under pressure, but trying to maintain a price of around 12,000 ISK, which is still quite a bit higher than the purchase opportunity we had at 10,000 ISK before the Citadel expansion. So currently sellers are at 11,500 ISK though, buyers are at 11,000. But that's just one order. It's actually 10,300, so under pressure. Morphite under pressure to go back. Buyers 10,300. If you can pick this stuff up below 10,000 ISK, you're probably doing a really good deal on the next bump up. This is of course Tech 2 related stuff, so I actually think that we could see less volatility with the new taxes that have been introduced with the Citadel expansion, but it is also something that is coming from Nullsic mining, from the Nullsic cartels. It is something that is easily manipulated by some of those major groups, and it probably happens from time to time as well. So you could keep an eye out for Morphite to continue to go down, and if it does, buying below 10,000 ISK is probably a pretty good deal. So that's it for the minerals. I would say on average a bit more stability is coming in, but the high-sec minerals are obviously under pressure, for the one exception, Mexelon. I would advise you to sell before that one starts to go down as well. Next up, Tech 1 ships, 1810. Okay, let's go over these and let's see if we can spot any trends or anything like that. Here is the Armageddon, much more stable here, around 190 ISK. 90 million ISK, so right in between here, 190 to 195, but finally showing a bit more stability, albeit at a lower price. Availability is decently high, buyers not that much demand, so that means that the Armageddon can, on low volumes, extremely low volumes in fact, have a pretty constant price. Battleships unfortunately not in the meta at the moment, which is I think why we had to give a bit of room here from 215 million to 195 pretty much for Armageddons. Next up here we've got the Caracal, also finally showing a bit more stability in the last few months, around 12 million ISK, so a bit higher this time than 11.5, which used to be the average price for the Caracal before the volatility. So a bit of the opposite. This cruiser is actually up a little bit, whereas the battleship seem to be down a little bit. Next up here we've got the Coveter mining ship. After a bit of volatility with a high at 36 million, we're now back down to 31 million, and we're slowly heading back to an average of 32 million. I think if you look at some of these data points, availability for the Coveter is way higher than demand. So obviously if no one buys anything, but someone actually does sell straight to a buyer, you get this dip in price, but that's also probably going to be on these low volume days right here. On average days, 32 million for the Coveter, and if you look at this entire chart except for the one spike here, it actually looks pretty stable once again. Next up here, the Dominics, coming off of a an unusual double top in a battleships, but also on increased volume. So probably null-sec purchases is what we're talking here. Other than that, average of 200 million, we're pretty much heading back there. So availability pretty damn good as well. In fact, 33 Dominixes here, just below 200 million, are going to help with stability when it comes to upwards pressure. I think that's just not going to happen with 33 Dominixes being brought to the market here all of a sudden. In fact, quite a few more recent sell orders. So Dominix is just around 200 billion. People are probably seeing that as an opportunity, but if activity does slow down, I think we're in for more stable prices here as well. Next up, we've got the Drake, actually. Interestingly, always trying to push towards 58 million and then coming back a little bit, which is what it's doing right at the moment. So 53 million to 58 million, that's less than 10%. But it's a bit more volatile than some of the other ships that we've already covered here. So interesting, the Drake, decent availability, not too great, but showing some swings, not exactly big enough that I would say you could try to trade in Drakes. But it's interesting that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tops have formed in the last 6 months. This is pretty unusual when it comes to Tech 1 ships that I would personally expect to be more stable than this. Next up here, we've got the Mauler. Here we do have quite a bit of volatility all of a sudden, from 11 million to 13 million, but now we're averaging 11.5 to 12, somewhere in between that, and this is definitely a lot more stable here all of a sudden. Availability, they're starting to come back, so it's not that many sell orders, but when they come, you've got 27, 22, 36. That does mean that people have to immediately buy almost all these new Maulers if they do want to create a price spike. So the Maulers were actually really drying up, but it's good to see them come back a little bit to the market, which could only help with bringing this into a more stable situation. Next up here, we've got the Myrmidon. There was some volatility in the Myrmidon with tops at around 64, 65 million, something like that. Now we are back to 54 million, pretty average. This is actually definitely some strange volatility, right? You see 3 of these, the final one obviously on a big volume spike, but to me this looks like it could be an attempt at manipulating the Myrmidon market a little bit, and if that is a single person that actually purchased all of these, they're left holding the bag now, because there's just no way that they're going to be able to make money on the purchase that they make, let's say from 58 to 64 million. If you bought all of those Myrmidons in this volume spike, you're losing money, and you're gonna lose money, because here 54 to 56 million, around 55, it's the average for a Myrmidon, and I think that we're gonna stay there. Sellers are at 59 million, buyers are at 51.3 million. Yeah, anything you bought above 60 million, maybe even 58 million, is gonna be probably a loss for the next few months. So this could be manipulation gone wrong, or it could be that a couple Myrmidon fleets were bought, but I'm not seeing it on the first 2 spikes, which is why I'm a bit skeptical that this was actually market driven and not speculation driven. An attempt at manipulation here, I think, is in the books. And other than that, really 55 million on average seems to be okay. So if we can not look at these 3 spikes, then yeah, Myrmidon's looking quite okay. Next up here, we've got the Oracle. Well, this is a bit more interesting. You see a bit of a wave pattern here, starting at, let's say, 80 million here at the bottom, going up to 95 million, back down to 75, back up to 90 million, and now back down pretty violently, actually, towards 80 million. So I think there are trigger prices above 90 million, seems to be a pretty major one, where people start to really make oracles, and as a result here, in like the last week or so, people went from 88 million, and then they brought all of these oracles competing with each other, pushing the price back below 80 million on the sellers. So I think that's what's happening. What is interesting is that we're seeing this twice in this 3-month pattern. So as a result, you know that purchases of around 80 million or below 80 million could actually be good longer term when the price slowly goes back up towards 85, 90 million on less supply. I think that this could be because the Oracle is a tier 3 battle cruiser, it's one of the more recent Tech 1 ships that was added, and so not as many people have perfect blueprints and can immediately jump on opportunities as something like the Myrmidon, which has existed for a very long time, or any of the battleships, or the Caracal, or things like that. I think there are just fewer industrial players in the Oracle market, which makes for that interesting wave pattern, which means that some opportunities, longer term opportunities for trading, may exist here. Next up, we've got the Raven, 185 million. We're pretty much heading back there, 190 on an average. This looks more volatile than it is, I think. So let's see what the availability is like. We still have some new Ravens. You can see that we can browse a little bit, 11, 10 here. There is healthy demand for these, surprisingly enough. But the sellers are at 190 million, the buyers are at 172 million, and honestly, I suspect that Ravens are going to start to stabilize. If you look at the 20-day moving average and the 5-day moving average finally meeting each other here, 185 seems to be the meeting place. I think on lower activity we could actually start to stabilize here a little bit. Next up, we've got the Retriever. That is a bit of a surprise. You can see here for the first 4 months of the 6-month chart, we're definitely averaging 29 million pretty stably. Then we see some volatility with opportunities above 30 million. Unfortunately, it looks like supply is too high at the moment, and we're now basically stabilizing at 28 million, a million less than before the volatility was happening here. And any signs that this is going to end, 28.7 million for the sellers, 25.7 for the buyers, but much less demand than supply. So I actually think that this could be here to stay. A bit of a loss here, a bit of a damper on the Retriever market, which again, lower activity. I think the first activity that gets the axe is going to be mining, so I think that could actually be normal. That could mean, 25.7, buy some Retrievers for 26 million. That's right here on the chart. I think if you do manage to do that, this could be decent purchases on any more volatility. You will have to keep an eye on that though. Next up, the Stabber. Interesting again. Basically, if you take the entire 6-month chart, averaging 11 million most of the time, now dipping back to 10.5 pretty volatilely all of a sudden. So we managed to maintain 11 million for a little bit. Here all of a sudden we're down. Very low volumes, and I thought that the availability of the Stabbers were going down quite substantially as well. So my read on this was that we were actually potentially in for a big price spike if someone decided to try and manipulate the Stabber market. But yep, here we go. Look at that, 85, 86, 87, 88, 20, 21, 17, 27. So all of a sudden the Stabber market actually someone or a lot of people brought more Stabbers to the market and actually put pressure on the price to go back to 10.5 million. And so the exact opposite of what I thought was at risk happened here. People actually did fill up the Stabber market. There's just no demand for it. They actually pushed the price back down 500,000. So interesting to see this happening. Rather than a price spike, the exact opposite can happen as well to empty ship markets, which is something we've not seen in a long time actually. What used to be the pattern that I was seeing during these EVE talks is that when prices went up, that's when supply came in. So the industrialists were willing to wait, or were basically not having the means to oversupply everything or to fully supply everything, and so they actually spotted opportunities on higher prices to change their industrial output. And this is the first time in a long time where we actually see a stable price crashing down on higher supply. And so this again, another indication that maybe a lower activity is causing less demand for a lot of these ships. But if industrialists that have their facilities running are just keeping up at the same pace, that could actually put more pressure on some of the prices, but also add more stability to the Tech 1 market, which is personally my expectation for the summer here. Next up, we've got the Tornado. The Tornado is a bit more volatile. You can see on the volume spikes that it's a bit different from the Oracle as well. It is one of those ganking ships, and from time to time ganking corporations do buy much bigger volumes of them when the price is right. So it's normal that you see a bit more volatility rather than the wave pattern on this tier 3 battle cruiser. But again, going back down to 74 million. So as a response to the unique nature of this ship, which is to have an enormous amount of alpha damage for for the amount of money that you're paying. This is what you're using to gank freighters, for instance. There are probably a lot more people that do have tornado blueprints ready because they know that these opportunities to sell will show themselves, that this is a market with that extra demand compared to a lot of the other ships, and as a result it's stable overall, 74-75 million on average, but it has some more volatility on volume spikes as well, but that's being filled by more players having tornadoes, the opportunity or the facilities to actually create tornadoes, which is, of course, we're talking the blueprints here. Next up, the Typhoon crawling out of the hole towards 185 million, but again, this is just a dip despite higher volumes here, really weird. But a dip to 165, but the average 180-185 million for the Typhoon. Availability, just basically nothing. What this indicates is that nobody's buying Typhoons at the moment. It's just not worth it. Couple may buy from the sellers, then these get filled right back. Couple may buy from sell straight to the buyers, so you get this average price of 185, 190, yeah, close to the buyers. So most people basically are just dumping their Typhoons right to the buy orders. Maybe one or two still that are impatient buy from these very few sell orders, but will this get filled? Well, we did just come off at a big volume spike, so if that's interesting. Someone did basically buy every Typhoon below 215 million. Is it a fleet? Again, I doubt it. Is this a good idea? Again, I doubt it. If people do spot this, they'll just fill it with fresh Typhoons. They have the time, the demand isn't there. So I actually think that over the next 2 weeks, Typhoons are going to start to come in here to compete with this, and whoever bought about 100 Typhoons up to the price of 215 million is probably going to be sitting on those for quite a while, because I think people are willing to wait. I mean, 18, 19, probably maybe 15 of them a day on average, on the lower averages. That is producible. That is probably easy to bring out from fresh supply. And so I think if this is manipulation again, this was probably a bad idea in my book. I think we may have a bit of a price spike. I don't think we'll reach 250 million, and then I think it's going to get squashed right away by fresh supply. And so someone is going to be stuck with probably 80, 90 Typhoons at overpriced situations. Interesting attempt though, so I think that's basically what happened here. Volume spike, empty market, which was my expectation, but now we'll see in the next few weeks if choosing a battleship to do it was a good idea. Personally, I don't think so. I would risk something like that in the cruiser market, right? You have no more stabbers, you decide to buy everything and then try to release them at a higher price, try to make a bit of profit on that initial trade attempt. You know, those move fast enough, volumes enough. Doing that in the Typhoon, in my opinion, very bad idea. Next up, we've got the Vexor. I think that one is stabilizing at 12 million. Yeah, a bit of a high period here. All the Galantia ships seem to have had that for a bit. But now, obviously, stabilizing on decent supplies. 12.3 million for the sellers. 10.8 million for the buyer. So interesting Tech 1 market. I'm seeing more stability. I'm also seeing lower activity in some of these numbers. I'm seeing for the first time in a long time, just basically fresh supply lowering the price of a ship, not on a high point. That's really weird. And I'm also seeing a strange manipulation attempt in the Typhoon. We'll definitely keep an eye on that one next week. So next up, Tech 2 ships, 33, 35. Let's take a look at these. Again, for the Tech 2 market, which used to be my go-to for active trades, I'm expecting that to really be dying down now because of all the taxes. So here the Basilisk, as you can see, slowly going up over the course of probably 3 weeks or so, from 200 to 210 million. You can't make any trades on this, right? And showing the stability pretty much since this is the war. Then around here we have Citadel expansion, just way too stable to make trades on this. Cerberus though, showing me wrong. How interesting is that? That is interesting, completely unexpected in my book. So it's already starting to be a pretty interesting episode of Eve Talk here. So we were meandering around 200 million or something like that. A median day actually reached 200 million and now price spike up quite substantially. What we do notice is that here we had very low volumes, prices went low towards 200 million. Never really sure what the buy orders were at that point. Could he have bought at 190? I don't think so, but below 200 million probably. But here, higher volumes, all of a sudden, big increase in price from around 200 million, let's say, to 250. Currently, sellers are at 268 million, buyers are at 243 million. Can you imagine that 2 weeks ago you could have bought these for 200 million? That is not a bad deal, but yeah, okay, interesting to actually see volatility in a Take-Two ship. I think it's on higher volumes. I suspect it is fleet doctrines in nullsec that have done this, so probably some major purchase from some alliances to create these fleets, because this is part of the meta at the moment. Something like Cerberus fleets are flown very actively by some of the major groups, and that does create the opportunity. So I do think that while in general we may still see less volatility, I said last week that I expect that if you still want to spot opportunities, it's gonna be war related. It has to be nullsec related, and I think that this will be an example of that. Maybe if someone has knowledge in nullsec that someone is building Cerberus fleets, feel free to post that in the comments, but at least it shows to me that the Take-Two market is not completely dead. It's just going to be a lot harder to actually spot good buy opportunities. Next up here we've got the Claw, slowly heading below 20 million, but again you can see that increased stability. It's slowly under pressure though, and buyers are at 17 million. I think that's starting to be interesting again, but you have to wait for the right trigger to happen to bring that volatility to increase the price. But buying at 17 million, I think if you look at this entire chart, that's definitely not bad. I think there's an opportunity for buying Claws. How long will we have to wait to actually be able to sell that? That's going to be hard to say. Next up here we get the Guardian, which did go up as well from 130 million to 210 million, but you can also see that it was not as volatile. You needed a bit more patience to sell at the right time. Now it's back under pressure, but again it's not a complete cliff back to 140 or 50. This is just a more slow burn below 180 at the moment. So sellers are at 179.4 million, the buyers are at 167 million. The pressure is on for the Guardian, of course, after such a high point, but you can also see here that it's not as volatile as what it used to be. Let's maybe go for a 1 year chart. The margin is much bigger, but here you can see up down very sharply, up down here. This year not that good, so it's maybe not the best example, but a little spike like this from 130 to 170 million, those are trades that have basically happened in a matter of just a few days. So that's, I think, again showing slightly less volatility. Not completely ridiculous to want to trade in Take-Two ships, but you need much bigger horizons for it now. Next up here, the Hound, again, look, you can see a bit more stable, increased volume, just bumping it up from 20 to 21 million, already going back down towards the averages. So here, unless the buyers are way lower, 19.5 million, I mean, historically Hounds, you want to buy that below 18 million as a short thing. So 19.5 still quite a bit above that. You could try, but personally I think I'd want to wait. Next up here we get the Ishtar, again going up to 240 million. I think this could be Shadow of the Serpent related. Let's be honest, the Ishtar, the #1 Take-Two cruiser for like high-sec exploration, combat sites in high-sec, things like that. That is probably, I think, one of the reasons why the price went up here all of a sudden. So 232 million for the sellers, 221 million for the buyers. Quite a bit of new supply. The pressure is already on here. But yeah, unexpected spike from 210 to 240 million. Although I think the explanation for this one, it could be a nullsec fleet. It's still part of a doctrine, but it's been nerfed a little bit since its high days. But I think Shadow of the Serpent could play a major role here. Next up we've got the Manticore, again showing that stability at 24 million. And unless the buyers are close to 20 million, nope, 22 million. I'm not gonna risk this, honestly. Next up here we've got the Nemesis, again way more stable, above 20 million. Buyers are at 19 million. You could maybe try it. I mean, 19 million here, it's the low point on the chart, but are you gonna pick a lot of them up? Is it gonna be worth it? How long will you have to wait? All of that is going to be something that I'll keep an eye out on EveTalk, but I think we'll have to wait a lot longer now. Next up here, the Oneros, you can see the slow increase in price, which is definitely not what we saw right here. Look at that. In the same period of time that Oneros went straight from 140 million to 170 million, in the 3 months before that, it did so with 3 sell opportunities and 2 decent buy opportunities, like 155, 150. You could have sold them for 170, 180, and here you had 1 buy opportunity at 140 million. People obviously spotted that, and now we actually have to wait more than 2 months, and now we are at 170, 175. Sellers are at 185 million, so it's still dry. This is obviously going to be your time to try and sell your Oneros. I think we're close to the top, but you can see the lower volatility, the longer time ranges that you need in order to make these trades now. Next up, you get a purifier, again stabilizing at 24 million. Tried to show some volatility, but you can see the tops decreasing, the bottoms decreasing. So this again is just finding its price at around 23 million for the sellers, 21.2 for the buyers. Do you want to buy this? I personally don't think so. Do you want to sell at this price? You're probably not making that much profit with all the taxes. So this is just, unless something happens with a nullsec war or a big purchase or something like that that drives up the price, then it's going to be difficult to make trades here. Next up, we've got the Raptor, again very stable for 2 months pretty much, now slowly up from 24 to 26 million, but that's still probably 3-4 weeks or so. And here we do have 25.5 million for the sellers, 23.5 for the buyers. Is that one you want to invest in? Personally, I don't really think so. And then finally we've got the Scimitar. Here war volatility much better, right? 140 to 175, back down to 145, back up to 175, back down again. Here Citadel expansion comes in, slow burn over a month from 145 to 165 million, back down to 155 million, not as low as we would like to see it. Then back up to 165, but this is just 10 million in between these. You could make a bit of a trade, but it's still less than 10%. It's on higher volumes as well. So yeah, it's tricky. The Tech 2 market has become much more tricky, especially if you're not in the know when it comes to nullsec wars, fleet doctrines, and things like that. So the Cerberus proving me wrong, but I think that's just basically nullsec activity that we're talking about here. Next up, the Tech 3 market, 42.15, and you may have already have seen from the ticker that actually the Tengu went up quite sharply. That's pretty interesting, but let's take a look at the tactical destroyers first, because part of my theory is that we're at the moment in a very stable situation in wormhole space, that the citadels being deployable in wormhole space and very difficult to destroy there, I think are going to just add to the stability, and that unfortunately that means that anything coming out of wormhole space is in all likeliness being oversupplied at the moment at low points under pressure. So here we go, this is the Confessor, again playing with 40 million, a couple of higher data points at the tail end here, but new supply 40, unfortunately, trying to sell at 44 million, buyers are at 38.5 million. Honestly, if you can buy below 40 million, I think you're doing a really good deal on these Confessors. In fact, the fact that the chart is still at 40 million indicates that a lot of people are probably selling to these buy orders as well. So under pressure, I think that's pretty damn obvious if you look at the availability here as well. Just crazy how many Confessors out there. People just aren't buying enough of them. Next up here, the Hecate, again, it tried to crawl out of the hole towards 44 million, but then you can see that the pressure, despite high volumes, still maintained itself and is now back at 42 million. So 42.5 for the sellers, 39.1 for the buyers. You can again pick up Hecates below 14 million in all likeliness, and we went pretty low here for a small amount of time. But if you look at the entire chart over 6 months, it's pretty obvious that the pressure is on, the oversupply is here. The new Hecates on the markets 4.5, but again 11, 18, 8, that's just decently high numbers for single orders that are still coming in despite these extremely low prices. Next up here we get the Jackdaw, a very similar chart heading below 40 million. In fact, sellers are at 39.6 million, buyers are at 36 million, and this is really not what you want to see. Then 19, 50, 40, 104, 26, 23, those are the volumes on the latest orders competing with each other. That's obviously a show of oversupply. I think the Jackdaw is now very depressed. We're not going to see too much supply here, but if people keep making more of these tactical destroyers in wormhole space because they can, then they're going to just start switching to Hecates and to Confessor. They're going to start pushing those prices towards 40 million as well. And if all of them ever get below that, then we could go even lower. So buying some Jackdaws here, I think it could be okay. Just don't overdo it, because you may actually have buy opportunity at 35 million by the end of the summer or something like that. So yeah, the Jackdaw again, a picture perfect example of oversupply, because this is crazy, right? You actually have Confessors selling for 44 million, Hecates selling for 42 million, but Jackdaws are coming in by the dozens and even more than 100 of them, and this one is below 40 million. That shows that it's just that there are too many being created at the moment. And then finally we've got this Zwepel, who bumped up a little bit and is now trying to get back to 45 million, but I think the response is immediate. And yeah, the response is this is just crazy. This is more than a full front page of new Zwepels coming in here, including 122, 231, 28, 10. So this little bump up here above 45 million, basically almost everyone that makes tactical destroyers decided to switch to these Zwepels, and now they flooded it with so many of them that it's gonna be hard to ever crawl back above this, because that's just crazy. These are hundreds of Zwepels that have been brought in the last 24 hours just because they could sell them close to 46 million. I mean, this is gonna put enormous pressure on the price again. I would actually not be surprised if at some point, if this continues, all of them are gonna get below 40 million. So tactical destroyers oversupplied, I think there's no question about that. Let's take a look at some of the cruisers here. Yeah, the Legion low point 130 million, currently 150, sellers 165 million, buyers 141. So you can see that it's the margin that has increased, and it has increased on big volumes. I think this is again Gnostic action. Couple of Legion fleets, I think that does make sense. I think this is what these purchases are about. So the real question is going to be, will this be able to move enough production from destroyers to cruisers to actually not crash all the prices down at the same time? It probably will, but I also do think that we may see a bit of a spike here, but that we will start to go back down on fresh supply. It's starting to happen. I would say so, half a front page, a bit more than that, coming in with 19, 12 and 11, the latest one. I think that's already going to start to put some pressure here. Next up we get the Loki, again going up on, in price as well a little bit, but currently sellers are at 153 million, definitely 154, definitely quite a bit less than the Legion. You can also see that there's less supply coming in here, but yeah, it tried to come back just a little bit, not really on that much volume. Or definitely not that much more. Next up here we get the Proteus, again big volume increase right here, price spike up to 160 million, current sellers 165. So yeah, definitely big purchase in the Proteus. Again, Proteus fleet, I think it does make sense. Could be investments as well, be careful, that is a possibility too. But that's basically what happened, and we probably know that in the Tengu something similar happened. Yeah, double step up to 160 million. Again, volumes increased, that's pretty damn obvious. So 163 million for the Tengus, 141 for the buyers of Tengus. The next few weeks for the cruisers are going to be interesting, because we're still seeing that crazy oversupply in the destroyers. We're seeing increased volumes of purchases for the cruisers, driving up the price maybe 10-15 million, something like that. Will this get squashed down by new supply? Is in next week or the week after that, are we starting to see dozens and dozens of Tengus and Proteae and Legions coming into the market, and at the same time we still see the same situation in the destroyers? Then I think that indeed high 6 wormhole space stability could actually be depressing the entire tech tree wormhole industrial spectrum. And this is why for the extra material today we are going to check the fullerenes 4910. because I want to see what's happening there, right? This is gas mining that you can do in wormhole space. For that we have to go for manufacturing and research, and here we have gas cloud materials called the fullerenes, C2832, etc. And this is stuff that you mine in wormhole space. These are the 6-month chart. You can see that we start at 10,000 ISK for the C28. We're currently at 6,000 ISK, 40% loss over 6 months. We are at 6-month lows at the moment. I think it's pretty obvious that we are in an oversupply situation for these at the moment, compared to at least what it was 6 months ago. Next up, the C32. We went very low, honestly, from 26,000 to 10,000. Now we're actually crawling back up a little bit here. So we're not at 6-month lows, but we're still at a pretty low point at 14,000 ISK on the chart here. Here is the C320, actually one exception, but again we went very low to 30,000 ISK. So from 55 to 30,000 ISK, that's quite a bit of a loss, almost half the price. Now we're back up towards 50,000 ISK. So the C320 actually recovered a little bit. That's a bit of a surprise. It's the second one, and this one actually recovered quite a little bit from its low point. So let's take a quick look at supply on this one actually. Yeah, not too much in the last 24 hours. That's pretty interesting. Of course, I don't exactly know which wormhole spaces these come from. It could have something to do with that. But again, you do see that we dipped to a 6-month low, probably on oversupply and on a very stable situation. C50 next, starting at 4,500, ending at 5,000, so not showing a unified picture here. That's pretty interesting, although we do again see a very low point at around May here at 3,500. Next up we've got the 540, again that big dive down here, now trying to recover to 65,000. Here is the C60, that's basically stable except for one big volume spike. C70 next, also decently stable here. And again we do see a drop off in May. Fullerite C72, again the big drop off in May here. I'm not sure what happened exactly here. I think it's a Citadel expansion, then going back up, alright, and then the C84 again, pretty sharp drop off, but we're not at extremely low prices. So unfortunately I'm not seeing the same picture as I'm seeing in the actual Tech Tree ships. So I'm not seeing all of these being really oversupplied, very depressed, 6-month lows on all of them. That's not the case. What I am seeing though is that, that dip in May to very low points, that obviously happened in almost all of them. So something obviously happened in May. They are actually in the recovery phase from a very volatile decrease in price that happened here. If anyone has a story about that, feel free to post that in the comments. I'm very curious. So I would have thought that they would not have recovered that much, that most of them would actually have maybe gone up a little bit after such a sharp decrease, but that the very stable situation would have meant just way too much supply in this stuff and thus very low prices just in the Tech Tree ships. That's not really happening, so I may need to refine my theory on wormhole space at the moment, but I think it's pretty interesting to see this this sharp drop, except for the C60, but here again a drop, here the drop, here the drop of all of these fullerites. That's pretty interesting. Must have something must have happened here. I'll try to do some research, but that's going to be it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.